Well, hey, what's going on? Welcome into another edition of Chatterbox Reds. Nick Kirby joined by my pal Mike Hart as we are a day away from spring training games. Mike, how's that sound?
Oh, that sounds great. I told my sons, I guess what's happening on Saturday. It's like first Red spring training game, and they both went, "Yeah!" I was like, "That that I'm starting to raise them right, and they're ready to go watch this, game against the Cleveland Guardians in spring training." So we're very excited about it in our household. It will be appointment television.
Yeah, exactly. Looking forward to it, and I know you're like me, man. I've just really enjoyed the Winter Olympics.
Oh yeah.
It's been just spectacular. I think the coverage is really good now, and how you're able to kind of watch everything really easy. Man, I have gotten so far into curling, Mike. I never thought it. I'm telling you, if you're someone who's watched curling a little bit, and you're like, oh, this is kind of cool, but I don't really understand it, so I'm not going to pay attention. I'm begging you, next time, watch a couple YouTube videos, learn the rules, and then watch it, and I think you'll really enjoy it. I love it. I'm excited. There are probably people listening right now. If you're listening 8 a.m. on Friday morning, turn our show off. I don't normally tell you to do this. Turn it off. Go watch the USA semifinals. Come back to our show because they've been absolutely electric, and I've really enjoyed that. You've enjoyed curling? I know you've enjoyed the hockey as well.
Oh yeah, I got my American Heroes Mighty Ducks shirt on for the women's gold medal that they got on I guess on Thursday, and yeah, it. I'm very excited about that. Curling has definitely roped me in. It ropes me in every year just because it's one of those things that the amount of strategy that goes into it is great, and I just love the randomness of it. Right, like the ice is constantly changing, and there's just a level of I have to deal with something that was I couldn't plan for on with almost every shot, and I really like that aspect of it because it hasn't been like super dialed in like speed skating or bobsledding. So I really like how just like kind of you got to just deal with what you got, and who can deal with that. I think that's pretty cool.
Well, I'm gonna try to get into curling beyond the Olympics. I've said this before. I always get into hockey during the Olympics. Like I think
Oh
most
yeah.
people, if you're an American, you should be into hockey during the Olympics. I don't know how you're not. If you're not watching that
Right.
women's game on Thursday and fist pumping at the end of the game, I don't know what you're doing. If you're not watching the
Walk
men
off.
on Friday, I don't know what you're doing. But I've always I love it, and then I don't actually watch that much hockey once the Olympics
Yeah.
are over. I enjoy it. I have nothing wrong with hockey. I like it. I just can't get into it. Hockey's a really hard sport to dive into being an NHL fan if you weren't born into
Hmm.
it, because it's
Right.
probably like baseball in a lot of ways. It's kind of a sport where there's so much to it. But I don't know, man. I've been looking up the pro curling leagues. I might be dialed in. There might be Chatterbox Curling coming at some point. We'll see. Maybe it'll all die off soon, but nonetheless, I've really enjoyed the Olympics. Should we talk some Reds baseball, Mike? I'm assuming that's
Let's do it.
probably why people have tuned in to the show today. I had to get my curling out. I have no one to vent to. My wife is sick of me hearing me talk about curling. My kids are definitely sick of it. So thank you for indulging me. Go USA Women on Friday. All right. Well, Mike, today we're going to talk about the 10 top storylines that we're watching going into spring training. I know we're into spring training every year. It's like spring training and what is there to watch, and I agree with the sentiment overall. Like spring training stats mean very, very little. I don't go as far as to say they're completely 100% meaningless. Like I know some people do, but I think they're about 90% meaningless for the most part. But there is a lot of interesting things that we're going to be watching this spring, and as you're getting into spring training, we wanted to share those with you, see if you agree, and so we'll run through that. So, Mike, we're going to go back and forth. You're going to give us the first one. What is the first thing that we're watching this spring? These are in no exact order.
Right. Yeah. The first thing that I'm very interested to see this spring is where does Spencer Steer play the most? Right. He's going to be filling a lot of roles potentially this year. Whether it's first base, second base, left field, maybe even third base. I think that there's going to be a lot of things that maybe we won't have exact answers, but we'll be able to get a better idea of where Tito wants to play him with the current roster construction by where he plays in the spring. My guess is probably outfield. especially now with Nathaniel Lowe at being able to man first base. So for somebody that maybe isn't as he doesn't hasn't played outfield as much, especially last year with his hurt shoulder, that you would kind of want him to get as many reps as possible out there. So my guess is probably out in left field, but that's what I'm interested in. Is like, where is he going to be? Are they going to switch him mid game? They maybe Sal starts at first base and then they move and they bring Steer in to play second. Maybe they move McLean over to shortstop, give Ellie a day, and Steer plays second. So I'm just very interested in how they're going to deploy him this spring position wise.
I'm already annoyed at the Sal Stewart getting taken out in the 6th inning.
Yeah.
I still haven't forgiven Noelve Marte coming out of the game for Connor Joe against the Dodgers in right field. I'm already angry about that. Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is probably one of the biggest puzzle pieces that kind of makes everything else fit, really, right? I don't know if you saw, Mike. I should have prepped you on this. I don't know if you saw the Spencer Steer clip, but kind of didn't seem like he was really just like, oh yeah, I'm so excited to be the utility guy. I'm, team guy, all that. Not saying he's not team guy, but there wasn't a whole lot of enthusiasm about it. He was like, yeah, I feel really comfortable at first base. I feel like that's why I played so well. And I don't know. Did you get any sense of like he's not loving the utility role? Like he feels like he should be planted at first base?
Yeah, that's interesting, especially when he had the defensive season that he did. Obviously a finalist for the Gold Glove. I guess that makes sense. I think maybe some of that frustration is that, I think he'd like to be able to maybe go into an offseason playing the same position as he did the year before, right? Because if you think about it, he started as an infielder when he came up, and then they were like, we're moving you to the outfield. And then, he played mostly outfield in 2024, right? And then in 2025, they couldn't play him in the outfield because he hurt his shoulder. So they basically DH'd him until he was available to play first base. And then he played first base very well. So they just kind of kept him there. And there was a huge lack of first base depth that the Reds have. So I can imagine that having each offseason to be like, all right, now do this. All right, now do this. Now do this. That can be pretty annoying. So, so I guess I don't know the specifics of it, but I can imagine that is probably frustrating. But he's the kind of guy that is like, I want to be on the field. I want to help this team. And to be honest, I think it will be much more clear where he's going to play at the end of spring training as we go into the regular season, because I'm not sure that we break camp with everybody healthy. And I know that's probably not, knock on wood, I'd love for everyone to be healthy, but there's, a very low chance that somebody doesn't pick up something. This happened to Spencer Steer last year, right? His shoulder just wasn't able to get there and he talked himself onto the team. But it's just like, if something is, that way, then Steer basically slots in if there's an injury in the outfield, or slots into first base if there's an injury there, or slots in potentially in second base if there's something there. So I think that will be much more clear at the beginning of the season where he will be playing the majority of it at the beginning.
Yeah, and exactly. I mean, if there's one injury, he literally can slot into any spot, or he can slot into a spot that moves someone else into another spot, and it's kind of a musical chairs, and it kind of makes the roster fit, because it does kind of feel like the Reds maybe have one additional player right now that you feel kind of comfortable with in terms of like at least your versus right-handed pitching lineup. But yeah, I mean, there's a high chance that someone just gets hurt. The interesting thing, Mark Sheldon mentioned he will not be playing any third base. He actually played in 2023. He had made his second most starts at third base. He made 42 starts at third base, behind 53 at first base, and then he made 38 or 36 starts out in left field. But the defensive metrics were really, really bad at third base, and the Reds just since then have not played him there. So for a guy that's a utility guy, it's just kind of surprising that that's not even remotely an option. But I guess when you have Hayes and you have Suarez and I guess Sal Stewart, I guess that's just they're just not going to even consider that, and I guess CES as well.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's probably what it is. Suarez, is slots in as your defensive backup. He's in the lineup otherwise normally, but he's your defensive backup. And while defensive metrics were not kind to him last year, they were the year before. So I think there's some volatility, and he definitely is a defender that you're not like holding your breath every time it's hit to him, like say Noel V. Marte was when he played third base there, right? So I think that's probably it. It's just like, hey, we have that pretty locked down, and we have a pretty clear option if one of them gets hurt.
All right, moving right along, we're talking about the final roster spots, and I think there's kind of been a lot made everything. There's only one roster spot up for grabs. It's Benson or Blade, and I think that's kind of been everyone's thought. And I don't think it's as crystal clear as I think a lot of people have made it. I think there's certainly players that have an upper hand, but I really think that the final three there's three roster spots that are up for grabs. So you have your starting lineup, and then you have Jose Trevino, and then you have three additional spots. And I think it's between these players for the final three spots: Blade, Benson, Dane Myers, Nathaniel Lowe, outside chance CES, Toglia, Tyler Callahan, even Garrett Hampson and Michael Chavis as backup infielders if they decide to go to a more traditional backup infielder route. Those would probably be the two leaders. Now, of those three, I think two are for sure going to be outfielders just to kind of fill out the roster. But I do think there is a world where Lowe makes the spot with two outfielders, just because Spencer Steer is technically more of an outfielder than an infielder, we believe at this point.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that if we're at the Hampson Chavis level, then there's been lots of injuries.
I hope so.
Yeah, I hope that's why. Yes, you're right. There's technically an outside. I would say there's more of a chance for like Blake Dunn or Reese Hines to be on here than Hampson and Chavis because those guys are already on the roster. So, there. Let's hope we're not in that spot. But I think I agree with the outfield. I think Benson and Blade, right, both left-handed, right? That's correct.
Yes,
both left-handed.
Yep.
I think I don't see a world where both of those guys are on the list. I think I think one of those two fills one of those three spots. My guess is Dane Myers is going to be on this team just because being able to have somebody as a left-handed platoon, I think is going to be very helpful. So my guess would be one of Benson or Blade, whichever one has the better spring. I would say Benson probably has the leg up because of, familiarity with the team and things like that. But we never know. And then Dane Myers. And then that third spot, I think, goes to Nathaniel Lowe. They would have to do some shuffling, probably DFA Tyler Callahan or something like that, in order to make room for him on the roster. But that would be my guess for the Reds bench, basically. This is assuming Steer is already in left field because I think he may not be in the starting, I guess, against left-handed pitching. He may even start against right-handed pitching, but I think there's a pretty good lock that he's on the team in some capacity. So the three others that I would suspect would be either a mix, whoever, Benson, Blade, whichever is either not hurt or playing the best, Dane Myers and Nathaniel Lowe. That's probably my guess.
Yeah, I actually agree completely with you. I think that's exactly what it comes down to. I just have a hard time believing if Lowe looks good in camp that the Reds are just going to say, you know what, we'll let you go. It just seems like he's the kind of player that he's a long play. Like, because if there's an injury, like I feel like his upside is so much more than about anyone else. And like, with all due respect to CES right now, Toglia, I just think his upside is there. And I also think he provides a ton of value just sitting on your bench as a late bat. I mean, you have guys like Brian Hayes, who I love Brian Hayes' value. Matt McLain, I love Matt McLain's value. But both of those guys, if you're facing a right-handed closer, like, and you're down 2 runs, like, you kind of want a guy like Nathaniel Lowe to come off the bench and try to hit a 3-run home run or double into the gap or something. So I think he has a ton of value, and he also protects you over the course of 162 games. So I think there's a real chance that he does end up on the roster. The biggest caveat here, Mike, is if there's an injury to one of these really good defensive players. Like, let's say Brian Hayes gets hurt. Are the Reds still going to be fine with not carrying that traditional backup infielder when they're already going to have to put like Sal Stewart as your everyday third baseman or play Spencer Steer every day at second base? Like, are you going to be okay with not having your Santiago Espinal guy? That's where I think Tito right now probably doesn't love not having a one of those guys at the back of his bench. But I think with this roster, he could stomach it. But if he has an injury to someone like Brian Hayes or Matt McClain, that's where I think he's going to want one of those guys.
Yeah, I think Tyler Callahan probably, in my opinion, is like a sneaky one that could end up on here. Not because of how much that he's done offensively, but because of his position flexibility, specifically at second base. And I guess I'm not sure about third base, but also into the outfield for somebody to be able to come in and give you some of that flexibility. And he's already on the roster. So it's like CES is first base or DH. I guess he could play some third base. I know he's worked on that. So, but to me, Tyler Callahan is like the sneaky one that maybe could make this roster with an injury because of the flexibility and defensive depth that he could provide. And he's left-handed, right? So I think there's, there would be, we would have potential issues as well with platooning, but I would imagine he probably is not starting any games, just on as either, a defensive replacement when you had to pinch hit for Brian Hayes or Matt McClain or something like that. Something like you had to low batted for McClain in the top of the ninth. He, was able to do that. And now you got to close out the bottom of the ninth. Callahan can come in and play second base. That type of thing would be where I would expect to see him if he made this team. But I think there would need to be an injury for that to be something that would be realistic.
Callahan's a guy that I'm really watching close this spring, just because he's a guy I loved in 2024. He was really, really good. He was coming back off an injury, but from like the middle of May to the end of the year, he was a really elite hitter down at Double-A. Made it to the big leagues last year, then obviously had that just horrific injury. So you just don't know how well the guy's going to come back from something like that. But he's a guy with some potential. I think he has some sneaky potential. His second base is his most natural position. That's played by far the most there, 262 starts. Has made 61 at third base, but hasn't played third base really consistently since 2022. So it's been a minute. So I don't think he's in the third base conversation. So second base really, or left field for Callahan. I do think CES, though, has sneaky value at third base if there's an injury. And again, I think that's his best path to getting on the roster. I don't think he's done enough offensively to where he's going to supplant a guy like Lowe or maybe even Toglia, as sad as that sounds for CES. But if he looks good there at third base, if there's an injury and you feel like he's competent there defensively at third base, I think there's a path for him to play if there's an injury there.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think a couple things would need to break for that to be the case, but I don't think it wasn't last year, but I think the year before. CES had a monster spring and really, basically fought his way to really be considered on this lineup and on this team. So, if there is some level of that where what we're not taking into account is one of these folks that we just mentioned just goes nuclear, bats 350 or whatever, has some bombs and is just like he's hitting so well that we can't ignore it or something like that, or we want to reward something like that. So that's where we don't know necessarily where that will be, or maybe somebody the opposite, just goes terribly. I think it was like Tommy Pham, right? I think Tommy Pham went 0 for his first 25 for the Reds or something like that. So it's just like if there's something where it's just like, oh gosh, this is completely falling apart, that may have an effect on it too. But I think unless barring an injury, I think it's pretty locked up where I think that Tito would go.
My bold prediction is CES leads the Reds in OPS in spring training.
That's spring training.
I think he still doesn't make the roster, but I do think people are going to have, I hope, at least a little bit of a different opinion. Okay, this guy, there's still some potential there. Let's let him go to AAA and let's keep him as an option in our back pocket.
Sneaky, he's going to get some playing time against some not major league pitchers that may help inflate those numbers. But
When he can rack it up against them. All right, Mike, let's move right along. What's next?
yeah, so the next thing that I'm going to be looking for, and I think we probably agree a little bit on where we're leaning, but it's this final rotation spot. It's pretty locked up that we know it's going to be Hunter Green, Nick Lodolo, Brady Singer, and Andrew Abbott. Not in any particular order, but those four are pretty much locks, barring an injury, for the starting rotation. And this fifth spot, this Nick Martinez spot, is theoretically still up for grabs. Now, I think both of us would like to see it go to Chase Burns, but there's a couple other people that are legitimately vying for it, and they've said is a competition for it. There's been plenty of reporting on that. So there's Chase Burns, then there's Rhett Lauder, obviously missed almost all of last year with an injury. It was an oblique, and then also elbow at the beginning of the year. Came and was able to pitch a little bit in the fall league, but basically had a lost season last year. And then Brandon Williamson, the lefty who had Tommy John at the end of 2024, so missed all of 2025, but is back in 2026, apparently looking pretty good in camp, and still vying for that fifth spot. So I think having competition is good, because while I think it's Burns' spot to lose because of his track record of what he's done in the bigs, and just how effective his stuff has been. But I think having some sort of competition is good, and at least preparing you for what it's going to be like throwing in the big league. So what are your thoughts on this fifth spot and who you think should fit in there?
I've evolved a little bit on my thinking about this because at first I was like, this is such a joke. Chase Burns getting the last spot. You're like, don't be talking about this competition. And the more I thought about it, it would be kind of disrespectful to Rhett Lauder and Brandon Williamson for them not to be mentioned in that. I think it's more about just a respect than anything else. Chase Burns, in my opinion, and I think just not just my opinion, but I think what's going to happen. I think he's the fifth starter if he's healthy, period, end of discussion. But I think you want Lauder and Brandon Williamson believing that they have a chance if they pitch really well that they're a starter. Because I think that they both of those guys deserve that, and history tells us there's a good chance you'll need them. So I think that Tito's definitely a guy who loves the competition. I think Derek Johnson loves the competition. So I think it's more about a respect factor for those guys to say that it's a competition, where I think it's clearly Chase Burns. Like, the Reds would be nuts if Chase Burns... I don't care if Chase Burns gets lit up in spring training. Like, they would be nuts if he's healthy not to put him on the opening day roster, unless you're doing some sort of strategic innings limit thing. But even that, I just kind of say, don't get cute with a guy that throws that hard that might get hurt at some point down the road anyways. Like, just use the bullets while they're here.
If anything, you're playing the strategic innings limit on the two guys that missed out on last year, Lauder and Williamson, right? So they surely, they surely will have some sort of innings cap because they missed all of last year. So that also makes it more likely to me that they'll at least start, well, maybe in AAA or maybe as the long man in the bullpen. You never know. I think that is a sneaky way that one of them might make the team if they are like pitching well, but like there's not a spot in the rotation. They say, actually, Brandon Williamson, you gave up one run this whole spring. You get to be our first out of a bullpen guy, maybe to complement when Burns only goes 5 or something like that, or something to that level. So I think that there's a sneaky way that maybe another one could end up on this roster, but I agree. I think it's Burns's. And man, to hear that clip that he basically like, I just wanted to get to the big leagues, so I just only threw fastball, slider, and he's like, I got a change up and a curveball that I just stopped throwing that I've gotten a lot better and I want to throw. I was just like, oh my gosh, this guy might win the Cy Young. No, maybe not like this year, but just like that is awesome. Because what was the deal? It's like, yeah, this guy strikes out a bunch of people, but began to get predictable because he only threw 2 pitches. Turns out he throws those other ones. It just like it was a we needed to get acclimated to be able to have the confidence to throw him in a big league game. If he's able to implement even a third pitch, we saw how the splitter has revolutionized how Hunter Green is pitched, right? If he's able to get a third pitch, maybe a fourth pitch, like, look out, man. It's good. This is the Reds have something special if he's able to really, harness that type of stuff. So I couldn't be more excited to see what Chase Burns is able to do this year if he's able to tap into that whole arsenal.
Yeah, he's basically Hunter Green, but he's in year 2 way further advanced than Hunter Green was in year 2.
Right.
And I mean, I think Chase Burns has a shot of like being an all-star. And I'm kind of like of the impression here, like it's almost like in basketball where some coaches will pull a guy if they have 2 fouls in the first half. I'm just like, let him play. Like, what's it matter? Like, what happens in the first half matters just as much as the second half. So, like, I wouldn't get cute with Chase Burns. Just pitch him when you can. Let's try to rack up wins. Because wins in April count the same as wins in September. And I would just use him. All right, but this goes right into the second part of this, Mike, which is the next thing we're watching, which is the Reds starting pitching depth beyond that. So Chase Petty. Julian Aguilar, who we were really impressed with at the end of the 2024 season, and then Jose Franco. I tell you what, Mike, if somehow, some way, the Reds get through spring training without a starting pitching injury, and you have a AAA rotation of Rhett Lauder, Brandon Williamson, Chase Petty, Julian Aguilar, and Jose Franco, that would be one of the greatest AAA rotations of all time. I mean, that is some real talent. And that in itself, those 5 guys that right now are at this stage on the outside looking in, that is what has me the most fired up about this team. And that is what makes me think this team can actually has a chance of winning 90 games because they don't have holes. They have guys that can slot in. You're not throwing guys at any point that have no chance of being in the big leagues getting starts. And there's not many teams that can say that. Even the Dodgers have had to start guys that had no business starting in the big leagues. And knock on wood, that should not be the case for the Reds this year. And that's the key. That's the path for the Reds to a 90-win season.
Yeah, I completely agree. There's, at least 3 of those have had major league experience, right? Lauder, Williamson, and Petty. I'm not sure about Aguilar. Did he make it to the majors?
Yeah, he actually was at the end of 2024. It was kind of a dark time.
Yeah,
but he made a few starts. He was actually really impressive at a couple really nice starts.
He got hurt.
And then he got hurt and missed all of last season. So yeah, he's had a taste as well.
There's great upside there to it's just even the 2-week blister that Lodolo might crop up, or like the some small amount that Hunter Green would potentially miss for. I think this allows you the flexibility to feel okay, and then the dog days to be like, okay, we can give this guy an IL stint, let him rest up, so that we can get and we can feel good with Rhett Lauder taking that spot or Brandon Williamson taking that spot. Like, I think that I completely agree. There's a level of trust that you have even with these other ones that just wasn't there when it was Randy Wynn or Ben Scooter. I forget his first name, frankly. Sam Ben Scooter, right? No offense to those guys. I'm sure they were great, and they were awesome to have in AAA, but it's just like you feel way better about Brandon Williamson making a start than those guys. So it's definitely something that I would consider a strength, and it's very clear that's what the Reds focused on. It's just like they could have traded away pitching depth at the deadline. People were clamoring for them to trade away pitching depth, and they didn't. They were like, no. We are keeping this here because we think this is going to be our superpower, because it will be tested throughout the year. And I think, and I'm excited to see how that pays off for them this year.
That's why I'm most excited about the Eugenio Suarez deal. It's not necessarily the Eugenio Suarez deal. It just was I can actually talk about this and people aren't mad now. I said the same thing. I was talking about how great this rotation is, how no one cared before the Suarez signing. Now I'm like, okay, now I'll listen. So I like the Suarez signing. It's a great signing. Helps the Reds for sure. But this is the bread.
Helps your mentions out too.
Yeah, it does. All right, what's next, Mike?
All right, the next thing, I think that it's simply who's going to bat second, right? Who in each one of these lineups, I think one thing that initially we'll be drawn to is who's in that second hole. I think we expect TJ Friedl to be our first leadoff batter, Ellie De La Cruz to be our third hitter, and who bats second, depending on
Suarez fourth, I think is pretty locked in.
Yeah, I would agree. Probably Suarez fourth. We're not here we'd be here for another 45 minutes if we wanted to discuss what we think those, we've already admitted defeat to Tito. Is like, if this is how you're gonna do it, that's fine. But that second person, Tito has explained himself, hey, this is still up for grabs. So we're going to see who, whether it's Noel V. Marte, whether it's Al Stewart, whether it's Matt McClain even, or, maybe even somebody else, maybe Dane Myers against a left-handed pitcher, or something like that. I know that would get a certain crowd very excited and a certain crowd very angry to see Dane Myers in that spot. But I think that's a legitimate spot that you would be some guy that has a very high, WRC plus against left-handed pitching. Like, get him up there so he gets multiple chances at this left-handed starter. But anyway, so I think that'll be something to keep an eye on, because we'll be able to at least get a pulse of who's performing well, who's doing what they can, to earn that spot, and then where Tito is leaning. I think we'll get a pretty good idea by the end of spring where he's leaning for that opening day lineup.
Yeah, I don't want to spend a ton of time on this. We did a whole show on this one, but it is something that we're watching in spring. And yeah, I think Sal Stewart's the guy. I think for me, it's clear. I just think he's gives you the highest upside in that spot, can do the most damage against left-handed pitching to split those two guys up if you're dead set on betting those two guys there. So yeah, Sal Stewart for sure. Don't tempt me on Dane Myers. He should be batting leadoff against left-handed pitching. My lineup against left-handed pitching would make people so angry. Like, people would be so mad at me. My MLB The Show lineup against left-handed pitching, I think people would be throwing things at me.
Dane Myers, Sal Stewart, Tyler Stevenson. That's your top three. Spencer Steer batting fourth. Something like that.
Probably, yeah. Probably that would probably be. Yeah, that would probably be it. But I'd find a way to get Blake Dunn on the big league roster.
Oh, yeah.
To really big move. All right, let's move on, Mike. Next up, a kind of an interesting one. Deep South Commodities is a proud supporter of Chatterbox Reds and our Deep Drive of the Day, and DSC is a leader in renewable commodities for biofuel production, specializing in used cooking oil collection, aggregation, and sales. Visit www.deepsouthcommodities.com for more information. Thanks, as always, to our friends at DSC. And we also want to remind you that you can call or text 988 anytime, day or night. The 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is a place to get support for anything related to mental health. Whether it's an immediate crisis, simply wanting to find out how to connect with care, or anything in between, it's a 100% confidential, secure, and anonymous way to reach out for help when you don't know where else to turn. To connect, call or text 988 or visit mantherapy.org to get help. It's okay not to be okay. Next up, a kind of an interesting one, the World Baseball Classic. And it's interesting because we have two players playing in one of the players that's playing in the World Baseball Classic is extra interesting because Eugenio Suarez. So while spring training stats don't matter, I don't think World Baseball Classic stats matter, but they matter a lot more than spring training stats because these are games that are for real. If Suarez plays terrible in the World Baseball Classic, am I going to full-on panic? No. But if he hits well, I think I'm going to be like, oh, wow, okay, this is good. Because I think they've maybe glossed a little bit over the fact that he was pretty bad after he got traded to Seattle last year. And some of the StatCast metrics weren't as great as maybe he feels. And again, I love the signing. 1 year signing, $15 million. Sign me up for that type of player every day of the week. But I'll be interested to see how he plays in the World Baseball Classic. And he's going to apparently play every day at third base for Venezuela, which I don't know if is good or not. It's good if Ke'Bryan Hayes gets hurt, as bad as that sounds. It's good that he's playing there. If Ke'Bryan Hayes is healthy all year, I don't think it's good, because I think it's just wasted reps that he should be at first base.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I think you're probably right when it comes to that aspect of it. I always love competition. It's just like competition at the highest level, which is what he's going to be facing. I think, facing, high level pitching. I'm not sure what group they're in, but like high level pitching versus, a prospect in the Diamondback system, I think is good. I'm excited for that aspect of it. Just stay away from the inside fastballs, please. I don't want to put that. Just I would hate for something to happen like that would cause a bleed over into the regular season. I don't think it was necessarily. I think maybe only one batter got like severely had severe issues. That was Altuve last time. So let's hope that we can stay away from that. I don't want to put the hex on everything right now, but yeah, I'm excited to see that. But frankly, the person I'm the most excited about at World Baseball Classic is Edwin Arroyo. I think
Yeah.
he's going to be their starting shortstop. And I know that the reps that he's going to get is going to be better than the seventh, eighth inning reps of a minor league or of a spring training game or like the minor league camp game or, whatever that he gets to play. I know that going in and, being on that Puerto Rican team, which no Lindor, no Correa, no Baez, but still is going to have, I think, it's going to have players that are, major league players that he's going to be a part of that lineup. I think Yadier Molina might be the manager for it, which, Reds fans don't have a lot of love for, but is definitely somebody that has a lot of baseball knowledge to potentially impart to him. And just like being, hey, this is the everyday thing, and seeing how he handles is like, you're the shortstop. He's known for his glove. Can he hit? Coming off of basically a similar situation to Matt McClain, where came back last year and was okay, didn't have nearly the power coming off of a similar shoulder injury. Can he establish some of that back? This is a great spot, I think, for Arroyo to be able to face major league level pitching and, maybe even surprise some people. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, both teams are heavy favorites. If you're looking at the betting odds to get to the tournament, so you play pool play. Puerto Rico is with Canada, Cuba, Colombia, and Panama. Puerto Rico is minus 750 to qualify, so that they're heavy favorites. Venezuela is minus 900. They are with the Dominican Republic, so
but two qualify out of it, right?
I think the top one wins, and then I think there's a couple wild cards. I don't know the exact. I think it's something like that, but nonetheless, yeah. I mean, the Dominican Republic, obviously, he'll see some pretty good pitching from there. But yeah, I mean, Edwin Arroyo is going to get to play for a team that should qualify and should actually like have a pretty good position, and you get to play in some big games. So yeah, I'm really fired up about Arroyo. I'm more fired up probably about seeing Arroyo than Suarez. Just like we know what Suarez is. But getting to see Arroyo play on that stage, and I was fired up from that article from Charlie Goldsmith talking about how his StatCast numbers went up every month last year, coming back off that injury. And people forget, like in 2024, man, he was the talk of spring training for about 3 weeks. So I'm really excited about Edwin Arroyo and excited to see what he can do in the World Baseball Classic. What is next, Mike?
Yeah, the next thing that I'm going to be looking forward to is just how some of these prospects that are getting, going to get some time at camp, how they perform. People like your Hector Rodriguez's, right? Guy who really burst on the scene last year, had a pretty good winter league performance, and now is going to get some shot. We don't probably expect him to make the major league team, but how does he respond? Alfredo Duno, right? Alfredo Duno, being able is like, how is he going to be able to continue to mash even if he gets to face maybe even some major league pitching, if he does a split squad or something like that, where he stacks up defensively, how is he improving? We saw him working with Salvador Perez, very, very, people really love to comp Duno as like the big hitting catcher, with a good arm. That's very similar to what Sal Perez is. So if he's able to come up and be what Sal Perez is, boy, the Reds have struck gold. There's Cam Collier, right? He kind of had a season injury riddled last year. Came back and was pretty good in some times, but also not. So like he, was almost considered above Sal Stewart, and Sal Stewart has passed him. So we're going to see where he slots in. Is he playing first base? Are they, moving him back to third base? Where are things going to stand there? And then obviously Arroyo, and then Chase Petty. Chase Petty is somebody that has been great, has been really bad. I think he had like a 5 or 6 ERA in AAA last year, but still obviously young. There's rumblings of him starting to throw a kick change, right? It's a different type of changeup that is now all the rage. So I like when people are tinkering with that, and maybe that's something that can unlock something with him. So these are all the different prospects that I am looking to see how they respond, when with the big league club and how they do against maybe even some major league pitching that they'll get to face.
Yeah, I'm fired up about this. Hector Rodriguez already in Tito's good graces. Apparently, Tito said really was impressed with Hector Rodriguez. He loves his short swing, his ability to put the ball in play. So Tito is a big Hector Rodriguez fan. I'm fired up about Cam Collier. I want it so bad, but I feel like this is his breakout year. I really do. He's had like these. If you've followed him, he's had these months that are so good, man, where he's like one of the best hitters in the league, and one of the best hitters in the league as one of the youngest players in the leagues that he's been in as well. And then it just fallen off the next month. I think this is the year that he's able to put a little bit more consistency together and hopefully get himself into the conversation of being an option in 2027. I think that's what at the end of the year you want out of Cam Collier is you want him to be at the end of the year say, hey, this guy's a legitimate option to debut and help us win in 2027. I think that's what you want out of him. And I think Chase Petty, I think that if he's one of the guys that's like the most talked about at the end of spring, it wouldn't really surprise me. Because we've seen him be dominant at times. We saw him dominate the Dodgers last year in spring training. He went up, was it against, didn't he do both of them? Was it Yoshinobu Yamamoto and Roki Sasaki came in behind him?
Outdueled him, yeah. Because it was the big thing. It was like, this is going to be the first time anyone sees Sasaki, and the best pitcher in the game was Chase Petty against Mookie Betts, Shohei Ohtani, Freddie Freeman. Like they had their A-listers all in there, and he mowed right through them. So yeah, he's definitely got the stuff to be able to do something special.
Yeah, real wild card this year. And you know what? Hey, he could. I think we still are bullish about him as a starter, but he could get into the bullpen at some point, and he could be a very effective Connor Phillips. I don't think you want that route to be right now, but it's a possibility, especially if you get late in the year and you don't need him, which would be a great problem to have. All right, moving along. The next thing is the forgotten guys. Everyone's least favorite players, pretty much, I think, are these guys. Blake Dunn, Rhys Hines, and CES. We've already talked about CES, but Blake Dunn and Rhys Hines had really good years last year. They both had massive development years. And I think it went unnoticed just because when they got their chances in the big leagues, these super small samples, it didn't go well. And which is just so unfair. And one of the things that annoys me the most about how people critique some of these guys, like these are young players that get like barely a taste of the big leagues. And man, they stunk for a couple weeks. They're terrible. I hate that mindset. But both those guys were great at AAA, took massive strides. Blake Dunn, for the last about 3 months of the year, was one of the best hitters in AAA. Rhys Hines was terrible in AAA in 2024. Had that NL Player of the Week randomness in the big leagues, but he was terrible at AAA, and then he took massive strides and could also play center field. I think both of those guys helped the Reds at some point in 2026. I don't think either one of those guys are going to be a starter. Maybe Blake Dunn could sneak into a platoon role, but I think that those guys helped the Reds at some point in 2026.
Yeah, I agree. I think Dunn is somebody that, especially with Dane Myers, that people have just been like, okay, well, it's very clearly Dane Myers over Blake Dunn, and Dane Myers has obviously done this at the major league level, but I don't think it's that hard to squint to see a world where he is your Stuart Fairchild. Right? This guy that they brought in was able to play defense, but came in and hit very well against left-handed pitching. And like there was a time where you're like, oh yeah, Stuart Fairchild coming in to face this lefty. We feel pretty good about this, right? And he delivered many different times. So I don't doubt that. I think that there's definitely a way in which that could swing. Now, I don't think the opportunities are there for him right now in the big leagues. But if he continues to have a season like he did last year in AAA, if anything, maybe he gets consideration as somebody that, I know you're going to hate this, but somebody that gets moved for a piece to help in the big league roster in the future at the trade deadline or something like that. This dude that's tearing it up. So think about like what the Cubs did with Owen Casey. right? I don't love it, right? They just trade away their number one prospect to bring in pitching, right? They basically were, they didn't have room for this guy, and so they traded him away to add to their major league team. I don't think the Reds are in the position to be able to do that, but it does give them an option. If he is, continuing to hit the way he does, maybe some smaller team is like, hey, we need an outfielder that hits well against lefties. We're willing to part with some of our surplus to be able to bring this guy in and maybe play in our major league team. So you never know. If he hits well enough, maybe he becomes a trade piece to be able to utilize if the Reds don't have a quote unquote spot for him. So I think there's different ways in which he could be effective or at least help the Reds this year.
I can see that with actually re-signs in the CES as well.
Yeah.
I mean, if either one of those guys are just raking and the Reds don't have a need for them, I think that both of those guys have like real legitimate power, and if they look like they're taking a leap at AAA and they look like they're ready for another real big league shot, a team is just kind of desperate and has a spot that they can't fill, like the 2025 Reds had about 3 of these spots. Yeah, I think that they could be legitimate trade pieces. All right, what is next, Mike?
Yeah, this next one is something that I think we've all been kind of talking around a little bit, but we haven't really dove into the specifics. So I wanted to kind of do that, and that's ABS, this automatic balls and strikes that is coming to Major League Baseball this year. And I think we are all aware, unless you've been living under a rock, that this is coming. But I think there may be some misconceptions on what it is. This is not full robo umps. The umps are still calling the game, but instead there's going to be this challenge system. So each team at the beginning of the game is going to be given 2 challenges. And so this is something they've been testing out in the minor leagues. If you've ever gone to a minor league game, you've surely seen this in action, because it's as simple as the pitcher, the batter, or the catcher can tap their head and say, I'd like to challenge that ball, or that whether that was a ball or a strike. It within seconds will go up onto the board and say, nope, this is where the zone has it, and it was either a strike or a ball, and it gets confirmed. Now, the thing to note about this, each team gets 2 challenges. If you challenge and you get it right, you get that challenge back. It's similar to the replays, right? If you miss it and you miss 2 of them, then you are out for the rest of the game. You get 1 back per extra inning as well. So like if you're out and you go into extras, you get 1 back. But so because of that, I've seen this take around that is just like, wow, these framers, people like, why is Trevino even on this team, right? If all he brings is defensive framing and stuff like that, and this is going, like, why would we even have somebody like this? For the majority of the game, there is still going to be framing, right? You only get 2 challenges, and the number of challenges that were used, they said in the minors, it averaged about around 2, right? Obviously, some people would get them and use a third time, but then sometimes you didn't use them at all. So it's like you're only going to be 2. And this strike zone, it's going to be very interesting how teams, I think this is an interesting thing that I'm going to be watching in spring training, when they choose to use it. Because Charlie Goldsmith had a really good piece where he basically interviewed AAA catchers and Pat Kelly, the manager of the bats, and was like, how did you guys deal with this strategy wise? And they basically were like, unless it's like bases loaded, nobody out, you're not challenging before the 6th inning. So that being said, you can steal plenty of meaningful strikes before the 6th inning, and you're not going to probably get a challenge because people are going to be, they're going to be willing to accept it to save it for more of a high leverage spot. It needs to be instantaneous. And this is a very big thing. It needs to be instantaneous, like, oh yeah, within 2 seconds is what they say to make the challenge. And this is very big because they cannot have anyone from the dugout relaying in, hey, actually you should challenge that. Because what they don't want is somebody looking on their iPad and be like, oh no, that was a strike, and then relaying in, yeah, you should replay. They want this to be a very quick, only the pitcher, the catcher, or the batter can choose it. So I think that's a very important thing. It's also a standardized strike zone for I guess it's standardized to each player. So each player was actually measured this year, where the bottom of the strike zone, I think, is at like 27% of their height, and it's like 53% of their height is the top of the strike zone. So it's different for everyone based on their height. unless somebody grows during the year, which hopefully we're not at that point. But so it's going to be that, and it's also like a plane of, think of it like a plane of glass going over the center of the plate. So they have experimented with like a third dimension, like having the depth of the plate as well. And they said they got too many just like super looping curveballs that would like bounce, but somehow still cross in that plane. So it is, does it cross in the strike zone over the center of the plate, of the depth of the plate? So that is where it's going to be. And I think that this is going to be interesting in a couple ways because it's obviously going to be new, like the pitch clock. There's surely going to be a game that is ended because something happened. They challenged it and it's like, oh, actually it was a strike 3, game over. There's certainly going to be something like that. But I think it's like the pitch clock. It's going to really just settle in with fans. It's like, yeah, this is something that happens. And an interesting thing too is I think that the umpires are going to become better because of this. I think with a defined strike zone and they're giving real-time feedback of like, nope, you got that wrong. I think these umpires are going to get better. And they said that the correct, like the challenge rate in the or the how often it was overturned in the minor leagues was like around 50%. So most of the time they're getting it correct. And I think as the season goes on, the umpires will be able to dial in more specifically on what the strike zone is. So I think it'll be something that is going to be very helpful for those egregious pitches that you're just like, what are you looking at? The whole ball is off the plate. Like, how do you call that a strike? But we are going to not even necessarily notice it, similar to the pitch clock as we move on.
Yeah,
what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah. I think the most important thing that you mentioned is like how the umpires are going to get better, and I agree. I think it's gonna it holds them accountable much better. And again, I'm not saying like umpires like do anything wrong. Like it's an impossible job to do. I hope this goes further than the challenge personally. But I think this is probably a good way to ease it in. I think that by the time it'll be like the pitch clock, by the time we get to like mid-April, like it's gonna just be such a part of the game that like no one even thinks twice about it. But yeah, I think it's great. That'll definitely be something we're watching in spring training, kind of how this gets navigated and how it looks, kind of like the pitch clock when that was in spring training. That was the big thing, and yeah, I think you mentioned like that first week there was like that big pitch clock error. And everyone's oh my gosh, yeah. This is gonna be so terrible. It's gonna ruin the game, and then like there was nothing all year, and everything was fine, and it was so stupid that people were worried about it. But yeah.
The interesting thing, I think, is how they then track how good a new metric that's surely going to show up on StatCast is your your percentage as a catcher at challenging, right?
Yeah.
It's like, how good are you at knowing whether or not you can get something overturned? And I think that is going to be like a hidden skill that, like what if Trevino is awesome at that too? You would think somebody is just like, because it's like I am so dialed into where this strike zone is. I know like they're able to win 75% of their challenges or something like that. Like that's something that I think could be a pretty good weapon, especially in some of these higher leverage situations to steal strikes. Going from it's a 3-2 pitch and getting a walk or a strikeout, like that's huge. And if you're able to be dialed in to get that and be able to get it correct so that you can save one for later, I think that can be like that will win teams games, I think, because we are definitely going to see a bad pitch that everyone is going to know is a ball, and they're going to be completely out of challenges, and nobody's going to be able to do anything about it. Like that's going to happen as well because of they ran out of the ability to challenge. So I think there's going to be some really interesting storylines that we're going to be able to see the beginning of here in spring training.
Does a pitcher get angry at a catcher for not challenging it? Like after the inning ends, do they go? They're going to go into the dugout. They're going to look at the pitch like that was a strike. Why did you not challenge it? You cost me three runs on my ERA.
Also, pitchers famously think that like the zone is way bigger than it actually is. So there are some teams that were like pitchers are not allowed to challenge because they are too biased. It's like I threw that pitch great. It's like only catchers are allowed to do it. So we'll see if what that is with the Reds, right? Is if you're a minor leaguer or you're somebody who's younger, it's like, are you going to be allowed to challenge? But it's like Emilio Pagan or Hunter Green, are they going to be able to be like, no, that was a strike? Or are they going to be like, okay, it's up to Tyler Stevenson or Trevino? They're the ones that are going to be making the call because they're a little less of a bias. Like they got a better view of it because of, how they, they were the one receiving it. So who knows? Who knows how? I think it'll be interesting thing that will just it will play out over the spring, and we'll see what we'll get. There's definitely going to be a Charlie story about how so and so took over this thing, and Hunter Green was like, I'm never going to challenge a pitch. I'm just going to let Tyler Stevenson do it all, something like that.
And does some team find a way to kind of cheat on this a little bit and relay information?
So
quickly?
they it's interesting in the article I read, they specifically are like, part of the reason for the 2 seconds, like the immediate, is to prevent cheating, and any of the in dugout feeds are not allowed to have the strike zone box. So it's just like anything that you're looking at on like a monitor back there or an iPad, like, is not allowed to have the strike zone box. Now, being able to police that, is, you'd think that after the Astros thing, they'd be a little bit better
lights
at
in
it.
the outfield.
Yes, exactly. But there's I think they have thought of at least some of the ways that people might be able to game the system, and are trying to put things in place to prevent that from happening.
Yeah, the blinking lights, any sort of sound, hacking the pitch comm.
Right.
I'm sure teams are thinking
listening devices, all these things.
Maybe during the regular season, teams won't care as much, but it might be like the get to the playoffs.
Who knows?
All right, one last final thing. This is really for the sickos. Like, I saved the last one for the true sickos during spring training. Who establishes themselves as the Reds' number 3 catcher this spring?
Oh, man.
We've lost our fallen compadre, Ben Rortvedt, although I wouldn't put it past him finding a way back on the Reds roster. And I also think there's a real possibility the Reds do try to pick someone up. But yeah, you have Will Banfield, who I think we probably were, I wouldn't say super impressed with, but he wasn't a liability. And I think if you're a catcher and you're not a liability in the big leagues, that's a good thing, because I've seen plenty of catchers that are liabilities in the big leagues. So shout out to Will for not being a liability. Michael Trotwine, he's a guy that's kind of just been around for a while that I knew the Reds loved, but just really hasn't really developed anything at all at the plate whatsoever. Connor Burns is the guy that everyone talks about as the best defensive catcher in the Reds system. I know he still has been quite a ways away from the big leagues, but if there's some injuries, could he find his way up? PJ Higgins is a guy that I never really think about as a catcher, but he actually caught like 60 games last year at AAA. As he plays a lot of first base, kind of goes back and forth. He's listed on the Reds minor league or on the Reds non-roster invitees as a catcher, which I don't know if that means anything or not, but he is listed there. So I think that's something to kind of watch. I do think, though, Mike, there's a real chance the Reds are looking to pick someone up, especially if they end up having an open 40-man spot, if there's, an injury, 60-day IL injury or something. I think the Reds would like to have another Ben Rortvedt that they feel confident having as an option.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's going to be, you're going to get lots of opportunities, because part of, spring training, especially for catchers, is, just mitigating. Like, you're about to have to catch a full season, and I know, so those guys they're not putting in 8-inning games. You're going to be getting Banfield, Troutwine, Burns, Higgins, to be named later player that got cut by somebody else that gets brought in, are going to see some serious spring training innings for it. You would really just hope one of those can offensively kind of grab the bull by the horns and be like, yeah, I'm the third catcher, right? I think, who was it? Was it Banfield that we were like, oh, this could be Banfield? And then he batted like 085 in April and May or something like that. It was just like, well,
he had some incredible StatCast numbers in spring training last year. Like, he hit the ball like 112 miles an hour or something. And then, oh my God, this poor guy went down to AAA and he could not hit a lick. He had one of the worst April Mays of any player probably in the history of the International League.
Yeah. So you'd love for somebody just to be able to show some semblance of like some sign of life to be able to, because if there's, say, for example, there's an injury to Tyler Stevenson, hopefully we all hope a guy in his contract year, he's able to stay healthy and catch and, play in 100 and 1,520 games, right? But if there isn't something, you would want somebody that's basically, you're going to have Trevino catching every day, which is not great, but you want somebody that you can feel okay with offensively batting once a week, right? And if so, basically these guys need to be good enough to be able to potentially bat once a week in the majors in the case of an injury. And that's like the level that I like want them to get to, because I guess I don't know very much about Troutwine defensively, but Banfield defensively, I think has shown in the minors that he can handle himself pretty well. Connor Burns, obviously, we talked about his calling card is defense, but it's just like, who's going to be able to do that Sunday, or that Sunday getaway day after a late night on Saturday? Who's going to be able to not give you that much of a drop off in the level of an injury? I'd hope one of them is able to basically seize that role.
Yeah, I think you had 14 starts last year between wins and Banfield. So, again, like, you might not think it's a big deal, but there's an injury to Trevino or Stevenson that puts him out for a month plus. It kind of quickly becomes a big deal. So it's just something that I think, especially the sickos, you should be watching this spring. Mike, any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
No, I think we've given our audience plenty to look forward to tune into Reds TV and be able to, make sure, maybe impress a few people, be like, oh, Hector Rodriguez is out there. Let's see how well he's able to contribute to the outfield. Maybe some talking points to impress some friends that are watching it. And to be honest, we probably missed something too. These are just 10 because 10's a nice round number. But if there's something that you're interested in, I'm always looking through the comments, because I think there's some insightful stuff that goes in there. So I'd say comment below some stuff that maybe you're looking forward to that we missed, because I'm sure there's other storylines that we weren't even able to get to.
Yeah, plenty of individual players I'll be watching, like Sal Stewart, of course, and Noelve Marte. How does he look, especially defensively? Does Marte play in center field? Yeah, I mean, you could really, go down the list. The bottom of the back end of the Reds bullpen. Does Sam Moll get that last spot? Does Luis May and Zach Maxwell kind of have been penciled out? But those guys are really talented, and if they're throwing strikes, it's going to be hard to leave them out of the bullpen. So, yeah, you could go a whole nother hour talking about this. But we'll wrap it up there. Do a full video up if you're looking to how to watch the Reds on TV. Kind of broke everything down. But
well done, by the way. Well done. I thought that was very, very insightful.
Just one quick note, in case you haven't been to watch that, just something really important. Reds TV is free during spring training. So the game on Saturday is free. All you do is have an MLB account. You can watch that on Roku, any smart TV, your laptop, your phone, tablet, anywhere. It's free during spring training. And I think all MLB games are free during spring training, because I was looking, because I live in Cleveland. Reds TV doesn't apply to me. Guardians TV is free during spring training too. So I don't know if that's a theme throughout baseball. But if you're someone in the Northeast Ohio area, the Reds game will be free for you too. So you know that. So that's something. So we'll continue to kind of monitor that. We'll see as cable providers come out. We'll try to pass any information along to you. And then me and Trace will be live in the 9th inning on Saturday, tomorrow, as you're listening to this. Recapping the first spring training game, kind of giving our thoughts, having some fun as we start our 4th season doing this every single day. And we have yet to miss a game, spring training and the regular season. We've had a podcast up the morning after every single game. What is that, Mike? That's like it's got to be over 500 count spring training, 600 probably games, somewhere around there.
Something like that. We could do the math on it.
Yeah,
and counting. No, we have the countdown is like number of games since
we got to make sure we got to make sure we get to 1,000. We got 1,000 streak. That'll be, we'll have to do something cool for that. But yeah, every single morning, all spring training long. I'll do a lot of the recaps. I'll have some guests on. I think Mike's gonna do a little bit with me, and maybe one solo on the weekends. And Craig will be involved as well. But yeah, every single morning, all spring training long, we'll recap the game, keep you in the loop. We'll try to keep them short and sweet, not like this whole hour-long yapping that we did. We'll try to keep the episodes short, so you kind of have something short and concise every day, just to kind of keep you in the loop on spring training, because I know everyone's not able to follow every game, and the Reds go like a whole week without being on TV, so kind of hard there as well. But we'll keep you updated, so make sure you're following along. And as always, and most importantly, go Reds.